give it in our defense. But I think the methodology of using average that is proposed. But we had a press conference after the partnership meeting where we had decided to stay in everybody. It's interesting, because I did take a position of consulting with the membership. I didn't take a fascinating group, a large group of stakeholders. They have aggressive people.
We are giving you one of our updates on the electricity sector enterprise team, ESET. Yesterday, ESET gave the cabinet an update, and as you may recall, ESET was set up in June 2014 to examine issues in the public electricity sector, and some of those issues include the affordability of rates, the sustainability of operating the main provider, and the reliability of supply. This morning, we're happy to have with us members of ESET, led by Chairman Dr. the Honorable Vincent Lawrence. We have also with us Mr. Joseph Matalon, Mr. Christopher Zaka, Professor Alvin Wint, and we also welcome the other members of ESET who are sitting in the front row. Dr. Lawrence, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Madam Minister. Good morning, everyone, and I thank you all for being here. Since our last presentation to you, ESET continued with a number of stakeholder consultations, and we had significant discussions with a number of key players in the electricity market, and these included the Jamaica Public Service Company as a utility company, the Office of Utilities Regulation, companies from the bauxite and alumina sector who we have discussed cogeneration activities with, that's Jamalco mainly, and UC Rosal, who operates Alpat, the Ministry of Science, Technology, Energy and Mining, and we have also been involved with some of our international partners, mainly the World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, and we've had some assistance also from the UK government through the British High Commission. The main assistance that we've had internationally during this period came from the World Bank, which provided some assistance to us in analyzing both the technical and financial submissions from the entities who are planning to build, own, and operate power plants. They assisted us with assessing the gas markets, because as you know, we're looking to switch from liquid fuels to gas to a large extent as part of the diversification process. And we looked at trends, costs, shipping size, volumes, etc. And the World Bank also importantly have been doing a comparative study of best practices as we look at electricity policy as it affects licenses and as it affects a regulatory framework. And we've had a consultant retained by the World Bank who has assisted significantly in looking what are the best practices so that we can ensure that Jamaica is working with some of the best practices that they are. Now, you are all aware, because we've had this is the third press conference I think we're having, and we had indicated earlier that we had these proposals that we had recommended to the government for build, own, and operate new power generation and feedstock facilities, and that these would then supply power to the national grid. And we were very involved during this period in significant further analysis of these proposals, and we were involved in monitoring and reviewing preliminary works involved. That is, for example, the front-end engineering works that had to be done with the designs, and the requests for proposals, etc., which we'll speak about later on. But we've been very involved in monitoring and ensuring that the time frame and the schedules that we have set up for these to be performed are somehow being met. Now, you recall that the 4 proposals being analyzed are, first of all, the JPS conversion of the Bhopal Power Plant from automotive diesel oil to gas. And the second was that the JPS, in exercising a conditional right of first refusal to retire 292 megawatts of obsolete capacity, had proposed to build a 191 megawatt power plant and the gas terminal, as that power plant would be a gas-fed terminal, and so you need a gas terminal. The other 2 ventures were related to cogeneration and working with the bauxite and alumina sector. And one was the Jamaica venture, which would involve them building a power plant to provide themselves with steam and upgrade their own facilities, and at the same time selling 50 megawatts of power to the grid. And the 4th was an Alpart venture, Alpart, which is owned by UC Rusal, and that was for them to bring gas in, ethane, use some of the gas in their own system, their own boilers, to produce steam, also get additional steam from a new power plant, and power being generated in producing that steam. They had 140 megawatts of power, which they offered for sale to the grid, and that again we had included in our possible equation for that to take place. We have also, during the period since we last met, had several other entities who have sought to meet with us and to present proposals to supply basic feedstock. It varied from LNG, which is liquid natural gas, through to compressed natural gas, through to propane, through ethane, through syngas, you name it. And we also had people putting in proposals to build power generation facilities, essentially non-fossil types, things such as renewables, which we are all very conscious of because we've had a lot of talk and we've had a lot of involvement of renewables. But we've been talking a little more on biomass, waste to energy, even though there's been proposals coming in for solar, etc. Now, we want to give you a project status update on these 4 main activities that we outlined. We had recommended to the government, and the government had endorsed, and as a result, we had provided mandates to these various companies to go further along in developing their proposals and developing their projects, and presenting financial data and financial information to us, and for us to negotiate with them prices and costs and etc., to monitor certainly their engineering progress that they would make in doing these things. Now, as far as the Bhopal Power Plant is concerned, which is the first of the activities that we had highlighted and that we wanted to be sure comes on stream as soon as possible. And this, you recall, as I said earlier today, is to convert from automotive diesel oil, ADO, to gas. And this power plant is really a plant designed, also a gas plant, basically designed with a gas turbine. And we are anxious to have it converted as quickly as possible to gas to cut the cost. Now, we had looked at, and the JPS spent a long time looking at the type of gas and the fuel source. And at times they looked at propane, at times they looked at ethane. But the final conclusion was that we should go, and they would go with, which was endorsed by ESET, utilizing LNG. Before we get to a little more information on the LNG, you recall that the rate determination handed down by the OUR earlier this year, they included in that rate determination $15 million facility which should allow the Bhopal plant to convert from ADO, that's the automotive diesel oil, to gasoline. And I said gasoline, to natural gas, apology. And that's $15 million, which would allow that reconfiguration is more or less on stream. They have had negotiations with General Electric, and General Electric is on track with regards to carrying out that conversion, and it will take them, once the contract is signed, hopefully later this month or very early in July, it will take 26 weeks for the reconfiguration and the change over from ADO to LNG. Now, the LNG, the gas, you know, Jamaica has been trying to bring gas and look at gas for several years, in excess of 15, 20 years. And we have not been very successful, and we are not going to go into the history today. But through a competitive bidding process, JPS selected, with the endorsement of ESET, New Fortress Energy, or the Fortress Investment Group, and I think you are aware of this because JPS issued a press release last week on this issue, and they selected them as their fuel supplier. Now, what involves here is that Fortress will make weekly shipments of ISO containers from their Florida facilities, essentially mainly Miami port initially. And they will bring that, store it at our port in Montego Bay, where they will regasify the LNG and build a pipeline from the port to the power plant. And that process, the preliminary work, the preliminary designs, the preliminary engineering, and the process of identifying and coming to an agreement with the Port Authority on the use of the port facilities, identifying and coming to an agreement for the right of way for the pipeline, all of that has been well in progress and has been more or less agreed. And the permitting issues are being discussed with the NEPA, and those are fairly advanced in what would be required in regard to getting the necessary environmental permits to deal with that. The expected cost per MMBTU, which I hope you know is per million BTU thermal units, will be about $14 US for the gas delivered to the plant. And this has to be compared with the current cost per MMBTU in using ADO of nearly about $27. So we're nearly half in the price here on that, despite the fact that included in that $14 are costs related to the amortization of the fixed assets that have to be built, the regasification facilities at the port and the pipeline. So we are very enthusiastic about this proposal and this possibility. Based upon the conversion and the installation of the gas facilities, we are satisfied that the project is on target, is on schedule for the targeted completion of the first quarter of 2016. So we are expecting during the first quarter of 2016 that the bulk facility will move to liquefied natural gas. The second issue relates to the Jamaica Public Service generation replacement strategy. Now, JPS is due to build a 190 megawatt gas turbine power plant, and they were mandated to find their own gas for that gas turbine power plant, and so the proposal was to build a terminal near to the existing JPS site in Old Harbor Bay, or somewhere within the vicinity of the Old Harbor plant, or somewhere there within on the south coast, so that they could receive gas from that terminal. Last week, Friday, JPS issued a request for proposals for the supply of this liquefied natural gas and the construction of the terminal. Now, significant expressions of interest were displayed by a number of majors in the industry. And this has been very, very heartening to us, because it shows that there's been an interest in what's happening in Jamaica. There's been an interest and preparedness to invest. And we selected 12 entities of those who had expressed interest. to send the request for proposals to. I should just add that since then there have been a number of others who have been asking about being facilitated in also allowing them to submit requests for proposals. There's no final decision on that yet, but there are 12 entities that have significantly asked for, that are invited based upon the expressions of interest that they are given before. And those entities are quite diverse, and they include people such as Shell and British Petroleum, Fortress itself, who won the bid for Montego Bay, Clean Core, who came in second in the bid for Montego Bay, and a number of others. And we are very, very enthusiastic on that, and we have also included and invited in that bid process for proposals Petrojam, our local company. We want to point out that the terminal storage and handling facilities and its overall infrastructure is being developed as a separate investment, not only to support the 190 megawatt power plant at JPS, although this is the primary function in the start of it, but there's a lot of potential LNG demand and expansion opportunities that can flow therefm. To be honest with you, that has been one of the things that has been very difficult for us over the last 15, 20 years, because whilst there is a demand and there is a need, for example, in the bauxite sector and probably in transportation and other areas, the ability to build an LNG terminal, because of this relatively small size, and also to have the cargoes coming to Jamaica, provided its own challenges. So it's not just the source of the LNG, but the challenges involved in the capital in building those things. And improvements over the years and changes have made it much more feasible for us to put in an LNG terminal, and hence we think has been the great interest being shown by many of these majors in being a part of the business here in Jamaica at this time. We just want to point out that project development work is in progress. The JPSCO itself did some pre-feed study, front-end engineering design, to make sure that the work is progressive, to make sure you follow what we mean by feed. They have looked at issues related to the marine facilities that may be required to bring in the cargoes, and they've looked at issues related to the terminal itself and the siting of possible terminal and what may be involved and preliminary designs for those things. So the project development work is in progress. The pre-feed study has been done, and certainly the environmental impact assessments, etc., as we work with NEPA, are in progress, and those are going very well as far as production of data and being on schedule is concerned. So generally the project is on target, and our scheduled completion, you remember, for that project is sometime around Q4 2017. That's the fourth quarter of 2017. The third project that we wanted to bring to your attention relates to the Alpart gas turbine cogeneration development. You recall that we had advised you that Alpart had teamed up with an American ethane company, and they proposed to use ethane as a gas at their plant to fire their own boilers, produce electricity for themselves. They have inadequate steam, so American ethane is going to build a power plant, which would produce steam, which they would get from the plant. And this is the 140 megawatts additional that would be there from the plant, and which they were offering for sale to the grid, which we had indicated that we were prepared to consider as part of our baseload generation capacity, and had granted the approvals for that after seeking cabinet approval. Following on that, we authorized to proceed to have negotiations with the JPSCO for a power purchase agreement. The power plant, of course, would have been located at the Alpart plant site in Nain, St. Elizabeth, which is an area which the load demand is not very high from the grid. But it was a project which overall contributes significantly to the economy if we can marry the various parts together based upon the equation at a particular time. At the end of 2015, May, that is last month, USAL told us that they were having difficulties settling their partnership discussions with American Ethane. One of the conditions that we had set on them was that they were to produce to us the partnership arrangements, the arrangements for the ethane purchase in North America, where it was originated, the arrangements for shipping the ethane to Jamaica, the arrangements for receiving the ethane in Jamaica, the arrangements of the transportation of the ethane from the port to the plant, and the arrangements for the plant to be built at their site. Those are all things that we gave them a time frame in which they were supposed to provide us with these documents if we were going to move ahead in the process. It is in reporting on this progress that they advised us that they were not yet able to settle an agreement with American Ethane as the developer of the power plant and as a gas supplier, because American Ethane was supposed to supply the gas and develop the power plant. And they were seeking more time as it relates to either completing those discussions or to consider other proposals for energy at Alpart. In that they said that they had other possibilities and other proposals that they wanted to put on the table. We have a timetable and a schedule that we have agreed and which we want to bring the price of electricity down to the consumer. We have a mandate from the government. And we also have a mandate as it relates to ensuring that adequate baseload generating capacity is in place as we see it. And we therefore, as a consequence, told Rusal that since they have not concluded their definite contractual and commercial arrangements with the power developer, we were going to defer their arrangements pending any further developments because we are committed to meeting our schedule. Now I want to just let you know that this does not affect our schedule in what we're doing at all. And I'll explain to you what that means when I say that. The conversion of the Bhopal Plant currently is utilization in the national grid is probably 30% or less because of the high cost, and so it is not dispatched frequently, the high cost of the fuel with the ADO. When we convert, because of the low cost when bringing the fuel prices down, we expect Bhopal to be dispatched about 90% of the time. So the plant will be running about a 90% situation. When we tied the whole grid together in integrated resource development and bought power from Alpart, we will be bringing down the amount of time that Bhopal operates and bringing it down from 90% probably to under 50%, maybe even closer to 40%. Without Alpart, Bhopal would continue to operate in the region of about 90% in the economic rate. So it is really not a threat to anything we're doing in the electricity or in the generating sector. And we are advised, although it's not really in our domain, that Rusal is still proceeding with their plans for the implementation, but their main thing is to reassess their proposed fuel mix at this time. And they have not said this, but we are a little bit suspicious. I hear it on the news, and I think the news probably may be right, that with the current oil market, many industries where the price of oil has come down substantially have been reassessing what is their proposed fuel mix. And I think that this is probably one of the things that Rusal probably is spending time to do, to look at their proposed fuel mix as they decide their own situation. But I want to stress that any non-performance or delay in that project on their part does not affect essentially what we are planning to achieve as far as bringing down the price of the electricity to consumer and having adequate base generating capacity in the system, base load generating capacity in the system. The other project that we had announced as also another cogeneration project, also with another bauxite and alumina company, and in this case, Jamalco. And in the case of Jamalco, this was for a 50 megawatt coal-fired generation facility. And this plant is to be located on the Jamalco plant site at Halsall, Clarendon. Now, Jamalco has been looking at a new facility in the car to bring down their own steam costs. If you remember, we spoke about steam at Alpart. Steam is is used heavily in the process of converting bauxite to alumina. And they, in doing that, in converting, would have 50 megawatt to sell to the grid. Now, their own analysis suggested to them that they can do it most economically and least cost in the long term by a coal-fired plant. And I think we had announced that to you, that they were looking at a coal-fired plant. The negotiations and discussions that we at ESET wanted to have with them, whereby we go through their entire financial analysis and all of the engineering assessments, etc., were a bit delayed. And they were delayed because there was a change in the majority ownership of Jamalco last December. And the new majority owner obviously wanted to reassess and ensure that they were satisfied with the proposals that were being put on the table. They have come back to us indicating that they are satisfied and they are proposing to go forward and meet the timetable. If you recall that this plant was due to come in the second quarter in 2018. So we are still within the time frame and the schedule for that, and they've indicated their preparedness. Yes, right, and they're proposing to proceed on that basis. And Cabinet gave us permission yesterday to proceed with these discussions and negotiations with Jamalco. We have in hand their financial models, their design proposals, their detailed specifications, their preliminary consultations with the environmental approval agencies, etc. And I need to just stress here that the basic data, one of the things that we have an interest in this plant is not only the lower cost of energy, because it's significantly lower cost with the coal, but also the fact that if there's such a thing, our language used today generally, of clean coal, that's what this plant is about, and the emissions and everything else at the plant will be lower than the current emissions from the use of heavy fuel oil. I think we had stressed that before the approval, and we want to repeat it again, in that the particulates, etc., from the analysis and the engineering designs, you're ending up with a cleaner plant than the plant that currently exists on the Jamalco site. A lot of people get excited when they hear about coal-fired plant, etc. So we're not only improving the issue of the emissions, as well as the costs are being improved. So that's one of the big interests that we have in this facility, and we think that 50 megawatt will contribute significantly to our facilities. And that project, once we have the discussion, they'll move into the product development stage shortly. And the project is targeted and is scheduled for commissioning, as I said earlier, in the second quarter of 2018, and we are also on track for achieving that. So that essentially summarizes information on the four main projects, which are essentially Bogue, the JPS 190 megawatt at Old Harbour, with the terminal attached to it, the gas terminal, the Alpart cogeneration facility at 140 megawatts, and the Jamalco cogeneration facility at 50 megawatts. I want to just generally point out that, as we said at the beginning, that the multilateral institutions have helped us. I told you what the World Bank had been doing to assist us as it relates to tariff restructuring, the regulatory process, and they have been working along with the IDB, with USAID, in looking at issues related to loss reductions. I'm sure you've heard JPS talking about the high losses that we have, non-technical losses. A lot of it through theft. and have social implications as far as the use of that. And there's been a lot of work going into that, into solving that and consultation on the issue. And I've also told you that we had assistance from the UK government through the British High Commission, where they provided a consultant who has helped us to look at the whole question of gas, sourcing gas, what are the commercial and contractual terms related to entering into the contracts for gas, etc. And as I told you, with the Bogue situation, they're hoping to complete a gas supply agreement by sometime maybe the end of next week. And a lot of this information has been very, very useful and advice and the consultants in helping to arrive at the type of contracts and what would be important in these gas supply agreements. And the Inter-American Development Bank, they have given significant assistance also as it relates to issues looking at the loss reduction and certainly looking at the gas market. And this takes me to a point that we just want to mention to you, in that one of the objectives that we're trying to look at here is to see if we can, seeing that we are having this high interest in gas, and we can bring gas to Jamaica, and there is need for gas in the region. And there has been the thought of the issue of what is called a hub and spoke. Jamaica is trying to become the hub for gas in the region. So gas that would be imported, for example, from North America, some of that would be re-exported. It becomes a part of I'll use the word advisory, of that logistics game of moving products around. And it is one of the things that we're very interested in, and in the request for proposals, we have accentuated them highlighting the possible expansion and development of the terminal so it serves the region but not just Jamaica. And that's one of the things that we'll be assessing in trying to assess the proposals. But a lot of that is related to some of the work that the IDB had done as it relates to the regional need for gas and how could these small islands and small countries get gas in the hub and spoke arrangement. What are we going to be doing next based on where we are now? We are going to continue to finalize the detailed project and execution plans with the various entities, because we're dealing with a number of different entities for the different projects. And we intend to continue to work to have the most cost-effective power tariff to the grid. We're executing the project, we are monitoring the project execution plans and schedules for all of these projects. We have hired ourselves a project manager, which project manager monitors daily and participates daily in issues related to these projects. And we receive weekly reports on the project, on the project's progress. These we consider important because, as I said earlier, we are committed to meeting our deadlines and meeting the commitments that we have given to the country. We are going to be, over the next short period, be reviewing data and reports that we have, again, from the multilateral institutions and with some of their help, and especially the best policy practices. What we want to be sure of is that we continue to be an attractive area for investments in the energy sector. And to be attractive, we want to be sure that we have the best practice, the framework for all of our regulatory and policy issues are among the best practices, certainly in the region and in the area. And so all the legal, technical, commercial, and other types of benchmarking of that type will be towards global standards, and we were hoping to set some key performance indicators which will help us to be attractive and make us be competitive. And as to the expansion of that, as we have said earlier, is the best practices in licensing and the best practices in the regulatory framework across several jurisdictions in the area. So that in summary is where we are, and we are fairly satisfied as a team with the progress that we've made today. The battle is not fully won as yet. We have significant tasks to be completed. There are significant challenges. There are significant things such as ensuring financial closing of all of these transactions so that they're properly financed and that they're carried through to reality. But we are fairly satisfied with the data and the work that's done today, that we are on the right track and that we are getting things done as we are committed to get them done. I thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lawrence. And we too are convinced that this ESET team will get us on the right track. And we now open the floor for questions. You know the rules. One question and a follow-up allowed. And if we have time, we'll take other questions. Do we have any questions? Daro? I'm just going to throw. The microphone is behind you.
Thank you. Dara Smith from Television Jamaica. As it relates to the situation with Bogue and Alpart, you're saying that what's happening at Alpart won't affect your timeline whatsoever. My concern, will Bogue be able to maintain that capacity while you wait on Alpart to develop it?
Bogue will, let me explain to you. We have about 800 megawatts of power at the current time. We have roughly 292, call it 300, that we need to retire. Our demands, when we started last year, June, we thought the average demand was about 420. The numbers are showing up now that it's probably around 400 or just slightly under megawatts. And at peak, we are somewhere in the region of 500 and something, call it 600 megawatts. So there is capacity there to do things right. Therefore, whether the 140 comes in or not is not really the critical issue. It's making sure that what we have and the reserve we have is at the right price. Okay? So the Alpart was an attempt at part of the right price, but Bogue is coming in at the right price. So we'll have the capacity at the right price.
Any other question? Nationwide? No. I love this briefing. No questions. Whoa. All right, we're going to allow you one last chance. Any more questions? Well, sure, Dara. You know, we don't want the team to come here and they only get one question.
We are appreciative of one question. It means that we've been very clear.
Yes, obviously.
I'm just following up on the issue of financing the projects. And you're saying that's one of the concerns of, no?
No, it's not a concern. We said it's one of the things that have to be achieved.
Right.
Not a concern.
One of the things that you have to achieve.
Yes.
How are you going about ensuring that this is done? I mean, I know you said that your partner, World Bank, has been advising the ESET as to what's happening. Will the World Bank be assisting in this effort?
We have engaged from day one the World Bank and the Inter-American Development Bank in a lot of the work we've been doing and what the planning we've been doing. It's one of the lessons we learned very early back in the early 90s, in that the early engagement of the multilateral financial institutions facilitate the own development when you come further to the next stage of financing. And so that engagement has involved participation and awareness and involvement of people like the IFC and the IFC from World Bank and IFC from the IDB. In addition, there is significant interest being developed in the financing market. For example, the terminal facilities that are being looked at, the people who have expressed interest are all indicating that they can bring their own financing to the table to build those terminals. So it's a matter of our due diligence, and we are convinced that they can. For example, at the Bhopal Plant, where we have now shortlisted and selected Fortress, we're dealing with a roughly $70 billion entity who to spend $60 or $70 million, and I'm talking US dollars in all of this, to put in the Bhopal facilities is really not significant for them. Similarly, all the companies we're talking about, I mentioned a few to you, whether it be the Shell links or the BP links or others, to build a $200 million terminal. Again, they have all indicated a willingness to invest and a preparedness. So from that side of things, it's fine. When it comes to the power plants, we're not worried about the cogeneration, neither be Jamaica or Alpart, because the financing of those are within their own framework. So the real question that you're asking me is, can JPSCO finance 190 megawatt? Okay? You didn't put it that way, but that's really where you're taking me. Okay? And I say to you, yes, we are hoping to have financial closing on the JPSCO situation before the end of the year. They are doing all the work in the progress to date. We have reasonable assurances from the shareholders of their intent to invest and support the projects. And we have keen interest being indicated by the multilateral financial agencies as well as a number of investment banks. So there are no signed deals, there are no closed transactions, but there are a lot of interest and a lot of preparedness to invest and come to the table. What we need to be sure of is that that investment climate, because we have a responsibility too, to ensure that that investment climate is such that it can attract and it makes people want to risk their capital based upon a country risk. And that's part of what we're doing in looking at the whole framework, best practices worldwide, the regulatory framework, how it works. That is a part of the process of ensuring that we do what we need to do to attract investments.
Thank you, Dr. Lawrence. We want to thank members of the press who came out this morning. We want to thank our viewers on the PBCJ and those who are joining us on the World Wide Web. Of course, I want to thank the ESET team. You have done so much work, and the country is grateful for all the work that you have done. Professor Wynne, Mr. Zaka, the Honorable